He called me Hannah. Not because he forgot my name. Because I had stopped matching enough to remember. I want you to understand what that moment felt like. For years. For years of 3 a.m. sessions and cold coffee and the sound of my keyboard filling rooms he slept through. For years of fixing his bugs, rebuilding his logic, writing the architecture that made everything work. For years of being introduced as David's associate. David's support. David's team. Never David's partner. Never the person who actually built it. And on the last day, in a boardroom full of investors who believed the company was his vision, David Sterling looked me in the eye and called me Hannah. I did not correct him. I just smiled. The way you smile when something finally confirms what you already knew. That you were never in his story. You were just the foundation he built it on. I died 6 weeks later. Not dramatically. I stepped off a curb in the rain without looking. The last thing I saw was headlights. The last thing I thought was this. I never even got credit. And then I woke up. The ceiling was wrong. Too familiar. Too far in the past. I sat up gasping and found myself in the apartment I had lived in 4 years ago. Before the company. Before the boardroom. Before Hannah. I looked at my hands. Young hands. Unmarked hands. The hands of a woman who had not yet made the mistake of confusing love with partnership. I looked at my phone. The date made my stomach drop. For years before the boardroom. For years before the headlights. I set the phone down. Pressed both palms flat against the mattress. And breathed. Because I knew exactly what was coming. I knew the exact night David would knock on my door. I knew the exact words he would use. I knew every step of the path that led to a rainy curb and headlights and a name said wrong in a room full of people who would never know mine. And this time I was not going to walk it. Let me tell you about David Sterling. Because the story doesn't work if you think he was obviously terrible from the beginning. He wasn't. That's the thing about the kind of person who erases you slowly. They don't announce it. They don't start as a villain. They start as the most interesting person in the room. David was 26 when I met him. Charming in a way that didn't feel dangerous yet. The kind of man who spoke like the world already belonged to him even when he had nothing. No money. No product. No investors. Just an idea scribbled on a napkin and the absolute certainty that it was enough to change everything. And I was 24. Exhausted. Invisible to everyone around me. Writing code that nobody was paying me enough to write. Until David looked at me like I was the answer to a question he hadn't finished asking. You and me, Hayden. We're different from everyone else in this room. And I believed him. Because when you have been invisible for long enough, being seen by someone like that feels like oxygen. Even when it's poison. Even when what he actually saw was not you. But what you could build for him. He knocked on a Thursday. For years before I woke up gasping at that ceiling. I was 20 years old the first time he knocked. And I opened the door immediately. This time I was 20 years old again. And I knew what was on the other side of that door. I let him knock 3 times. Then I opened it. He stood in the hallway with the napkin already in his hand. Smiling the specific smile of a man who has already decided the answer before he asks the question. He started talking immediately. The idea. The vision. The future he could already see. You and me, Hayden. I let him finish. Every word exactly as I remembered it. Then I said something I had never said in the first life. I said I'm already working on something. He blinked. The smile stayed but something underneath it recalculated. What kind of something, he said. The kind that has my name on it, I said. and I closed the door. The first thing I built was a system architecture I had been developing in fragments for 4 years. In the margins of David's projects. In the hours between his deadlines. In the quiet moments when he was on calls performing his vision for people who would never know my name. I had never built it whole before. Because in the first life I never had time that belonged entirely to me. This time I had 4 years. I worked every morning before the city woke up. Not to impress anyone. Not to prove anything. Just because the work was mine. And that feeling. The feeling of building something that had your name on it all the way down. Was the most powerful thing I had ever experienced. 3 months and I sent an email to Dr. Una Park. A professor I had admired from a distance in my first life and never spoken to because David always needed something and there was never time for anything that didn't serve his timeline. I attached 3 pages of what I was building. Asked if she had 30 minutes. She wrote back in 4 hours. I have more than 30 minutes. When can you come in? Dr. Park was 52 years old. The most precise thinker I had ever encountered. The kind of academic who published papers nobody read because the papers were too far ahead of the questions anyone was asking yet. I sat in her office the afternoon she first looked at my work. Watched her read. Watched her expression change from polite interest to something sharper. Something more awake. She looked up. "This is yours," she said. "Not this is interesting. Not this could be useful. This is yours. In a specific proprietary original way that means you built something that didn't exist before you." I sat in that chair and did something I had not done in a very long time. I cried. Not dramatically. Just quietly. The way you cry when something you needed to hear arrives and you realize how long you waited for it. She handed me tissues and said nothing for a moment. Then she said, "Who told you this wasn't enough on its own?" I said, "Nobody told me directly. I just always assumed what I built needed someone else in front of it to matter." She looked at me for a long time. Then she said, "That assumption cost you something." I said, "I know." She said, "Don't let it cost you anything else." We filed the first patent 6 months later. Under my name. Just my name. Hayden Cole. Not a company yet. Not a product. Just a name attached to something real. Something that had not existed before I built it. The feeling when the confirmation arrived was not what I expected. Not triumph. Not satisfaction. Just a quiet closing. Like a door shutting on a version of my life that had kept me small. And another one opening into a room I had built myself. David launched his company 8 months after I closed my door on him. I heard about it through mutual connections. He had found another developer. Someone eager and talented and willing to work the same hours I had once worked. The product launched to reasonable attention. The kind that looks like success from outside and feels like something missing from inside. I knew what was missing. Because I had built the thing that was missing. And this time it was mine. Year 2. The patent drew attention. Not from investors immediately. From builders. People who read the filing and recognized what it was. Dr. Park connected me with 2 of them. A former student running a small infrastructure company. A venture partner who had been looking for exactly the gap my system filled for 18 months. We closed the first investment round by the end of the month. I called the company Coltech. My name. All the way through. David found out about Coltech in year 2 month 9. Not my name first. The company. Unusual returns. A methodology that analysts kept describing as structurally inexplicable. He spent 2 weeks watching it before someone connected the dots. Before he saw my name on the founding documents. I know what happened next because his lawyer called me first. Not David. His lawyer. which told me everything I needed to know about where this was going. The lawyer's voice was professional. Careful. The specific tone of someone delivering a threat wrapped in legal language. He said that David Sterling had reason to believe that the core architecture underlying Kolteka's primary system had been developed during a period of professional collaboration with Mr. Sterling. He said David was prepared to file for intellectual property rights. He said they hoped this could be resolved quietly. I listened to every word. Then I said, "Tell Mr. Sterling I look forward to seeing him in court." And I hung up. I want to be honest about what the next 3 months felt like. Because it was not the confident victory it might sound like from the outside. It was the most frightening period of my second life. David had resources I didn't have. He had the Crown's version of legal firepower. Expensive lawyers. Investor relationships. A public profile that made his version of events sound credible before mine had a chance to be heard. And he was using all of it. The lawsuit was filed on a Tuesday. By Wednesday, 2 of Kolteka's investors had called to express concern. By Friday, 1 had formally paused their commitment pending resolution. Dr. Park called me that evening. Her voice was steady. She said, "Hayden, do you have everything documented?" I said yes. She said everything. I said every commit. Every timestamp. Every file. Every version. For years of work with my name on every layer going back to the fragments I built in the margins of his projects. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Good. Because he's about to find out that stealing the surface of something doesn't give you the foundation." The legal battle lasted 11 weeks. I will not walk you through every day of it. Because not every day deserves to live in the telling. What I will tell you is this. David's lawyers were very good at arguing that the idea had originated in conversations between us. That collaboration implied shared ownership. That the line between his vision and my execution was blurry enough to constitute a claim. They were good at all of that. What they were not good at was explaining the timestamps. Because every single piece of core architecture in Koltek had been built after I closed my door on him. Not during our overlap. After. After the napkin. After the Thursday knock. After I said the kind that has my name on it and shut the door. Every timestamp. Every commit. Every version. All of it after. Dr. Park sat beside me in the courtroom on the day our legal team presented the documentation. I watched David's face as the timestamps appeared on the screen. Watched him lean toward his lawyer. Watched the lawyer's expression shift. Not dramatically. Just slightly. The specific shift of a man who has just understood that the argument he built is standing on nothing. The case was dismissed on a Thursday. 11 weeks after it started. David was ordered to pay legal costs. The press coverage that followed was not kind to him. Not because anyone attacked him. Because the facts read badly enough on their own. A male founder attempting to claim intellectual property rights over a female engineer's independently developed work. Timestamps that placed every line of code after the professional relationship ended. A legal action that appeared to confirm the exact dynamic it was designed to deny. By the end of the week, 2 of his investors had quietly reduced their positions. By the end of the month, his lead developer had resigned. I did not celebrate. I went back to work. He called me the day after the dismissal. Not his lawyer this time. Him. I let it ring 4 times. Then I answered. "Hayden," he said. He said my name correctly? Which was the first thing I noticed. I said, "Hello, David." He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I called you Hannah." I said, "I know." He said, "In front of everyone?" I said, "I know that too." He said, "I filed a lawsuit against you." I said, "Yes, you did." He said, why didn't you just tell me you had built it independently? I said, because you didn't ask. You assumed. The same way you assumed in that boardroom. The same way you assumed for 4 years. That what I built was an extension of you. That my work existed to serve your vision. That I was Hannah because Hayden was too separate from your story to be real. The silence after that was very long. When he spoke again, his voice had a quality I had not heard before. Something underneath everything else. Something that sounded like a man looking at himself clearly for the first time and not enjoying what he saw. He said, I'm sorry, Hayden. Not a lawyer's apology. Not a strategic one. Just those 3 words said plainly by someone who had finally run out of ways to avoid them. I said, I know you are. He said, what can I do? I thought about that for a moment. About the first life. About 4 years of invisibility. About Hannah. About headlights in the rain. About a door I closed on a Thursday and what grew on the other side of it. I said, David. There's nothing to do. He said, what do you mean? I said, the version of this where you make it right requires me to still need something from you. And I don't. Not your credit. Not your acknowledgement. Not your apology accepted in exchange for something restored. I built something that has my name on it all the way down. You tried to put your name on it. The court said no. That's the whole story. He said that's not enough. I said it's enough for me. And I meant it. Not because I had forgiven him completely. But because I had outgrown the wound. And a wound you have outgrown no longer needs to be addressed. It just needs to be left behind. Coltech went public in year 4. I stood on the floor of the exchange on the morning of the IPO and thought about a lot of things. About a laptop that never cooled down. About a napkin on a concrete wall outside a party. About a door I closed on a Thursday. About Dr. Park handing me tissues and saying this is yours. About a patent filing with one name on it. About 11 weeks of legal battle and timestamps that told the truth better than any testimony. About the specific feeling of building something that had your name on it all the way down. And what it costs to get there. And why it's worth every single cent of that cost. The opening bell rang. And Hayden Cole's name appeared on the board. Not David Sterling's. Mine. I want to ask you something before I go. Have you ever built something for someone who put their name on it? Have you ever been the foundation of something that everyone called someone else's vision? Have you ever been called the wrong name in a room full of people? If you have, I need you to hear this. The work was still real. Every invisible hour was still real. And the person who built something once can build something again. With their own name on it this time. All the way down. Comment below, have you ever been erased by someone you helped build up? Tell me your story. And if this one made you feel something real. Subscribe. Because the next story is already waiting. And it might be the one that finally puts your name on something. The end.